So dispensationalists often get criticized for supporting Israel, right? I'm a dispensationalist, you are. And, the criticism is often that we give them a so-called blank check. But is that true? Does supporting Israel really mean that we have to support everything that any given Jew might do, or anything and everything that the nation of Israel does? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's important to answer that because at the last few conferences during the fall, I was speaking on Israel's basically deal with the devil, their future with the Antichrist. And so, but I was laying out as a foundation, let's understand spiritual Israel. Let's understand the spiritual state of Israel today, a modern Israel. And I appreciate that opportunity to clarify because, as always, um, label like a dispensationalist is often misunderstood, but it also speaks in a broad brush, which is unfortunate to do because not every dispensationalist is going to answer in the same way. But what I would say is that if we have as a foundation the main framework of dispensation at the nugget at the bottom foundational level is three things, and this is from Charles Ryrie, so I'm not making it up. It's in his book. Is that number one? There's a distinction between Israel and the church. Number two, it is a leaning towards a grammatical historical hermeneutic, literal grammatical historical hermeneutic. And number three is that everything that God does is for His own glory. So that is the foundation of dispensational. Now there's a lot of variations as you go onward from that. But if we look at Israel, what we're saying, what a foundational dispensationalist will say is Israel, national Israel has a future. It's not the church. And those, as we discussed earlier, those promises that God gave that are spoken of, as we mentioned, all throughout the Old Testament into Romans 9, Romans 11, are irrevocable. Therefore, we reserve the right to defend Israel's promises, eternal promises to the land.
All right, so we support Israel in that we acknowledge their right to national sovereignty in the land that God promised to them, because, of course, we know it's part of God's plan to bring them back to repentance. Israel has to be brought to faith before the end of the tribulation, before the second coming proper of Christ, as I like to call it. And we see that in numerous places, Matthew 23, Hosea 5:15, and so many other passages. So that's really what we support as dispensationalists. It doesn't mean that we need to be supporting everything that Israel does or everything that any individual Jewish person might do or say. It doesn't mean that we need to be subsidizing them also with all our tax dollars and getting nothing in return to benefit America. We have obviously so many issues to take care of domestically, and nations are put in place by God to take care of their own people first. So we need to be taking care of our own issues. But let's also point out, I think it's so important to talk about this, the way that the mainstream media always criticizes Israel. They're the first to attack them over everything. And that's also completely not fair and really not warranted most of the time. I think the far majority of the time. They'll do the exact same thing that any other nation would do, but the media, you can guarantee, is going to call them out and not call out the others. It's clear that they have this bias against them. That should be obvious. And as soon as, for instance, they get attacked, there's no outcry against the attack, against the attackers, but there's an immediate outcry warning Israel not to respond. We've seen it time and again. And let me say this, Israel has a right to defend itself from national threats to its land and to its people, to its sovereignty, period. That's really all it is. So I personally have no problem with Israel cleaning out Gaza or defending themselves from these constant attacks on their own land. And, these people go to extreme lengths to call them out when really Israel, you could say Israel goes to extreme lengths to handicap themselves because they know they have to do things humanely to protect civilian life. They drop pamphlets ahead of time telling the civilians of that region to leave, to evacuate, that they're going to be bombing a target shortly, because they know that if they don't go to that extreme to handicap themselves, the international community is going to just intensely criticize them. So would you agree with that, or what would be your thoughts on that, Mondo?
No, I think this is where you have, again, the hypocrisy. I would 100% agree with that, where, Israel has never said, hey, children have not died. Okay, I mean this is a war, right? And so the difference being is that, for example, what we saw on October 7th was not only Hamas but civilians coming across and again taking women, children, as we saw just right now in the last week. The Bibas family is returning, and it's the mom and her two kids. And we also know stories of these people taking babies and putting them in the oven and turning it on and leaving. That is absolutely demonic and inhumane. And Israel is not taking a rocket and saying, "Well, we don't care if there's any even Hamas there. We're just going to bomb the school." We're going to deliberately target babies. That is, I mean, there's no obvious. I'll say it's completely obvious what's happening. The difference is obvious. So as you said, Israel's trying to do these things, and when Hamas puts children in front of them as shields, the true cowards here are Hamas. I don't understand why the left or the media doesn't say, how in the world could Hamas put a child, one of their own people? They don't care about their people. They do not care about the people. And this is why you see recently, this is really important, that Saudi Arabia and others have come out clearly condemning Hamas's actions on October 7th and said they're an embarrassment to Islam. They don't represent Islam. And so the war that Israel is doing is a war. And again, in this sense, Hamas started it. And Israel's not even returning the same level of evil for evil. But they do need to go after these horrible murderers. And unfortunately, Hamas is to blame when they set up shop in a kindergarten class.
And a
And Israel does their
hospital.
best not even to do it then. So no, what you said is right, that we, as a Christian, we defend Israel's right to the land, but we have to balance all that out with what that means as a United States citizen in charge of tax dollars, and what that means for, again, if I was a politician, how much aid do we give to not just Israel but other places in order to accomplish some of these things. So those are all great questions, but we have to remain balanced as always.
Right. And if we knew that the aid was actually getting to the people, it would be in many senses completely different. But, as we're finding out now, we have no idea where so much of this money is going to. And I think we all know where it's going. But, it's not making it to the citizens. And, with Hamas, we absolutely know where it went. You said it earlier. They're using it to create tunnels and bunkers and fund their terrorism. So, but anyway, let's go back to Trump for a second. So, this is going to be kind of to me, it's a funny question, but is Trump the Antichrist? Because I've heard a lot of even good Christians, people who we would agree with on a lot of things, make that statement. There's this notion that somehow, despite the fact that the entire, what I would call the deep state globalist cabal, has mobilized itself against him for the past 10 years, that we're supposed to believe somehow that he's actually the beast. So it's kind of hard for me to believe that the so-called Antichrist is doing everything I'd be doing if I were the president. What say you?
Exactly. I think this is where I'm reminded of Matthew 11, and I'll answer from a biblical perspective. Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, and he says, John the Baptist came neither eating or drinking, and you say he's got a demon. The Son of Man comes eating and drinking, and you say he's a glutton and a winebibber. So he says, you can't win. I can't win with you. So God can't win in that he sends a very reserved individual, austere, and you guys are upset. And so in the same way, what I've seen is, I think it's actually quite hilarious. I make the comment, look, I don't believe Trump's the Antichrist, and I don't think he's the American savior. And man, the venom, just for me saying that, like here I am, I'm like, he's neither one. And people will say, Trump is deceiving you, and of course, he's the Antichrist, and then on the other hand, you have people again. He's the savior of America. So in that regard, no, he's not the Antichrist, because I think there's so many reasons why people again just don't. I don't think they know their Bibles as it relates to the Antichrist figure. Now, on the other hand, I think the truth is in the middle somewhere. Like you said, I'm very skeptical that, wait a minute, the globalist elite that have been trying to keep Trump out of power for 8 years, now all of a sudden they just give him the red carpet treatment, and he's their guy. I, I don't I don't buy that. Now, what you will hear people say is, well, there's different factions of the elite of the Luciferian agenda, and so one faction's against Trump, and then this faction wants Trump, but even there, it's all conspiracy stuff that it's hard to vet out. This is what we know, that God's time frame for the last days is on schedule. And Satan will use anybody and everybody to accomplish his goal. And so in one sense, you see the immorality of the left in the previous administration promoting globalism. Well, in this sense, what I see Satan doing is saying, well, Trump will accomplish our goals even if he doesn't know it. And that could be through prosperity and technology and establishing the other technological elements that prosperity brings for the coming beast system. Again, as we know, I do think that, again, I've taught on this in other other contexts as it relates to the 10 kings of Revelation and other things being, I think they're potentially technocrats or oligarchs who are kings without a kingdom. They're kings without a government. They're kings without a region. But so I think that him surrounding himself with these technocratic people, one day I think the Antichrist is going to go to all of these guys and say, look, I need to accomplish my system, my beast system. I need surveillance. I need censorship. I need technology. I need all of these things. And he's going to make a deal with these guys. And they're going to hand over the technology, because we know the beast system cannot happen without the technology. So that's a long way to say I don't think Trump specifically is the Antichrist. I don't think he's going, I can't wait to set up because I'm going to step into the beast system and I'm creating the beast system for me. I think Trump is about Trump. Is he a godly man? I don't think so. I mean, he's certainly a godly person. And let's look at Jesus, right? Jesus is humble. He doesn't draw attention to himself. That is not Trump. Okay, so whether I like 99% of the things that Trump is doing, I like that our border's secure. I like that we want to get out of debt. I like male and female. I like all these things, but that doesn't mean Trump's humble, or that he's my pastor.
Right. Like I like what I've heard a couple of different people say, I don't have the opportunity to vote for Jesus, right? So when it comes to doing what's best for my country, personally, I love almost everything that Trump has done and is doing. And even some things that I disagree with, maybe on the surface, or maybe that I just disagree with, I've learned personally that they're probably necessary or strategic, because Trump and the guys behind him know a lot more than we do on the surface. I think 90% of what goes on behind the scenes, we have no clue. And there's reasons why they do things. And so they have information that we don't have. And so really Trump has earned my trust so far, to the point where, I can pick out a couple of things that, I don't really understand why he did it or did it that way. But in the big picture, I think he's done more than enough, for me anyway, just speaking personally, to earn some benefit of the doubt with me. But what does concern me a little bit relating to Israel is whether he's being advised by people who are Christian postmillennialists or dominionists who don't see Israel in the way that we do as dispensationalists. They claim Israel's no different than any other nation. They see no significance to what happened connected to 1948. And so my concern, and we can see this just by who he surrounds himself with on the Faith Council or whatever. So my concern is really that Trump is potentially getting advice, or would be in the future, would be getting advice to, make the deal of his lifetime. And, maybe that would involve splitting the land or a two-state solution or something like that. So let's start to talk a little bit about his recent plans for Gaza. And, for people in the audience who are unfamiliar with this, the Trump plan to so-called own Gaza, Can you go through some of what he's said publicly so far about this? And let's also talk about the many obvious pros to this, because there's some real advantages to this. In fact, it seems, from my view, to be mostly advantageous. But also, let's talk about whether we should have some level of concern about America owning part of what, by God's decree, really belongs to Israel. I'm a little uncomfortable with America owning part of Israel.
Yeah. So him putting out this very unique, unprecedented idea. Again, it goes along with his persona in that, you know, I just encourage people to follow his Telegram channel. And he speaks in language, and he always has. I'm a winner, and everybody else is a loser. I mean, I'm here to win. That's his whole goal, right? And so when he looks at history, he says no one else can solve this, and so I'm going to be the one that solves it. So I'm going to win. And to his credit, he recognizes that all the other previous ways were, as we discussed earlier, land for peace. Well, and now everybody knows that's not going to work based on October 7th as an example. So his suggestion was, well, again, we'll just offer all the Palestinians the American dream, and we'll transplant them, and we'll bulldoze everything, and we will make it a wonderful economic vacation place. And so that's what he said. And again, even Benjamin Netanyahu, was like, at first glance, he's like, I'm sure he if I was him, I would have been like, well, that's probably not going to happen. But hey, let's see where it goes. They don't care. They just want to see. They would love to have a buffer in there. They would love to see this become the United States problem. And so they know as well. Who wouldn't want the big brother to be on your side with the UN Security Council, which is the most important, as well as financing and money and world prestige, as it relates to not being attacked by all the other General Assembly of the United Nations. So the fact that Trump is putting this out there, Israel is thinking, great, somebody else is willing to come in. Now, let's remember this. I also think in terms of understanding Trump's desire of owning or changing this, being very naive, but also if people look at Trump's book, The Art of the Deal, it's you start really high. I mean, it's like if you have a car to sell and you want 15,000, but you start at 25, and somebody like 25,000, and they said, well, okay, fine, here's 25. Well, you're like, man, I got 25. I was hoping for 15. So Trump always is throwing out these outlandish things, even like the latest video that we saw that he promoted. We don't know who commissioned it, but he promoted about Trump Gaza. Golden statues and other things. It's actually really hilarious. But at the end of the day, Trump is saying we cannot do the status quo. So he's like, let's just go. Let me throw out this ultimate thing. And what did it do? All of a sudden, it brought Saudi Arabia to the table. It brought Qatar to the table. It brought all these people to the table of going, whoa, 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 we can't have that. And so what Trump is doing is saying, well, look, this is where I'm going. I'm going for 25,000 on the car, unless you come to the table and give me a counter offer. And so in that sense, they're going to end up somewhere, and all these other countries are realizing, ooh, well, we can't do that. So how do we come in here and rescue the situation and change it? So a couple things on that is that I don't think for 1 second that Trump is going to violate international law. In international law, you are not allowed to displace by force people from another country. Now, Israel did it to their own citizens. Okay, they should have filed a lawsuit. Honestly, the settlers should have filed a lawsuit. So Trump can't do it forcibly, but again, he's under the naive idea that if he just offers them money, that they'll leave, which they won't. They're not going to. So I think a lot of the reaction that people have is simply that. It's a knee-jerk reaction to Trump. In fact, when they've talked about, let's say it was to go forward, this is like a 15, 20-year plan. Trump will be dead. Trump is, 78, 79 years old. He'll be dead most likely. So, and something like this to happen, all it takes is the next administration to come in, which might hate Israel, and cut all the funding, and it's over. So if somebody asks me, Mondo, do you think this is going to come to fruition? Not even close. But it brings people to the table to discuss how do we get rid of Hamas? How can we come in there and rule in the sense of creating a place where Israel can have the fences there? And how do you get in a separate group? Now, what has happened as well is because of that, Saudi Arabia has come to the table, others, in saying, well, we're willing to put in our own, military. And at the end of the day, Israel is going to be eager for that. They can't trust Egypt. Egypt has already shown that they're willing to bring weapons through the Gaza Strip at the Rafah crossing and tunnels. Egypt's been building up their forces in the Sinai in violation of the treaty of their agreement. So, but they would love to have Saudi Arabia in there. They would love to have anybody else to come in and police these renegade Hamas, which Hamas won't be there. But now we're just talking about the Palestinian population. So I think people, all of us who are watching this, my advice always is don't react. Let's just wait and see. Give it 6 months. It could be a whole different
Yeah,
story.
because I agree with you so much that Trump is a chess player, and Trump's always playing 5D chess. So when he comes out and says these big things, and then the media takes it and they focus on that, they're not seeing 5 steps down the road like he is. He's doing it for a reason, to bring people to the table or whatever. So I definitely agree with you on that. So let's just say, for sake of conversation, that it does happen. Then should we as Christians, should we support this? Or could we take the understanding that America's not actually dividing the land? They're just taking over an already divided portion to provide stability. Because otherwise, it's just going to be a continual thorn in Israel's side. So are we providing a clear net positive in that way? Assuming that we don't actually own it in the sense of annexing it. I tend to believe that he's kind of just using hyperbolic language with own. I don't actually believe that we're going to own it. I could be wrong. What are your thoughts?
Well, for example, I do think there's not going to be I would be very surprised that there would be a wholesale owning of it. No doubt, it's very difficult, but Americans can go buy a house in Israel. I could own property there. So will it be the Gaza Strip of the United States as a territory? It's just it's never going to happen. But like you said, let's hypothetically say it would. I would find that highly unusual that Israel as a state would even allow that. But then again, maybe they might, because they already given it up once, and I think if that was the case, if Israel, like they did once, said, "Well, we gave it over to the Palestinians, we're going to give it over to the United States," I think that in one sense, it couldn't be done without Israel's permission, right? So if Israel is giving up the land to the United States for purchase, is God going to be upset with America or with Israel for giving up the land? So what do we know? We do know, and I don't speak for God, I'm not a prophet, but if just looking kind of what you mentioned earlier about the book that you mentioned, or even Bill Koenig's book, Eye to Eye, which is similar in that when the United States does something, then something bad happens, okay? Israel, what has happened in those instances, is whether it's Obama or others, is they have forced Israel's hand to do something, two-state solution or this. In this regard, this isn't forcing Israel to do anything. Israel will be like, yes, take it. Let it not be in our hair. You take the responsibility. And so I don't think that God would turn around and judge America necessarily for that, because Israel is the one dividing the land. But and we're not forcing them. What we do see, though, is, for example, Ariel Sharon, not long after he did this, he went into coma. He had a heart attack. He was in a coma for 8 years.
Wow.
I think God was completely displeased with the leaders of Israel dividing land. So in one sense, we might get mad at in Joel 3, the nations are trying to divide the land, United Nations, and we've seen that historically. In this instance, it was Israel that gave it up. And yeah, now granted, We don't know how much the United States was forcing it back in 2005. I don't know that. I don't remember how much George Bush was putting that pressure on Ariel Sharon. But I would make a distinction in that ultimately, I don't want to see the land divided, but I think God would be more upset with Israel for handing it over to the United States than he would be at the United States for accepting it.
Right. So then do you think America's going to truly own it then, or is it just going to be allowed to kind of manage it, run it, redevelop it, like Trump was saying, under Israeli oversight? You know, it's kind of like the idea of having a policeman move into your house to help protect you, you know, if
Yes,
you're fearful of burglaries or something like that. No
I
one's going to
think,
attack them knowing that we're there.
yeah, I think internationally, that's a great way to say it is I don't think that Israel is going to handle a deed over and it's going to be recognized as a territory like if, a 51st state. We have a lot of 51st states, right, that we're working on.
Yeah, we're going to be on like the 55th if we
Yeah,
get
we'll be like the
Gaza.
55th state. I do not think it'll ever get there at all because but from Israel's perspective, I don't think it would need to. They'd be like, look, they already reserved the right to go in to Gaza and wipe it out when wipe out terrorists. Again, seeking terrorists. So if they could say, hey, the policeman wants to move in, because and really, look, it wouldn't even really be their house. It would be like the neighbor's house that come in and bring the police into my neighbor's yard and set up a buffer. We'd be glad. We don't care. Again, it wasn't ours anyway. I really don't think that Israel would even want it back. Now, if let's say that video that's out there or this dream, it's Trump Gaza casinos. Um, would Israelis move there? Yes, because I would tell you this as well. And here's another angle on it, which a lot of people aren't talking about this, is right now you have Jewish settlers who are in boats looking at Gaza. And these settlers who have been removed or even others are eager to get back in there. And so they are going to probably have an opinion on whether America owns this land. Now, they also might say, well, we're willing to, we might not care if we can get our land back that we were forcibly removed on. And so could they live there side by side? Possibly. We also remember that many of the settlers or many of those that are religious, they don't appreciate Trump morality, belly dancers and other the high life of what a Trump casino brings. So I think that Trump is a master provocateur, and he gets people worked up. He uses names for Pocahontas because he knows that just pokes at them.
Yep.
So these things he loves to menace the press who have been horrible to him. And he knows that he can get them worked up simply by just putting a tweet out or posting on X, for sure.